gun was already on the table when Petra Voss walked into the room with a mop. She had not been supposed to be there. The cleaning schedule said conference suite A on the 43rd floor was booked until 9, and it was now nearly 11, and Petra had already done the lobby, the hallways, and the executive bathrooms on 42. She had one floor left. She had a bus to catch at midnight. She pushed the cart through the door without knocking because cleaning staff never knocked. That was the first thing her supervisor had told her 3 years ago when she started at Hargrove Tower. You are invisible. Act like it. She understood that instruction better than anyone. What she did not understand, stepping into Suite A, was why 7 men in suits were seated around the conference table at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, why a pistol sat beside the water pitcher like it belonged there, and why the man at the head of the table, broad-shouldered, silver-templed, the kind of handsome that money makes permanent, was staring at a document with the expression of a man who had just been told his house was on fire. Petra stopped, the mop handle knocked against the doorframe. Every head turned. She was 31 years old, 5'4", and wore a navy uniform 2 sizes too large that her supervisor had handed her on her first day and never replaced. Her dark hair was pulled back with a rubber band. She was, by every visible measure, the least important person in any room she entered. She had spent most of her adult life making sure of it. "Get out," said one of the men near the door. He had an accent she placed immediately. Zurich, educated, the particular flatness of German-speaking Swiss who had learned English from British tutors. He did not look at her when he said it. He was already looking back at the document. Petra took one step backward. Then she heard it. The man across the table, younger, darker suit, a scar along his jaw that his collar couldn't hide, said something in a low voice to the man beside him. He said it in Mandarin. He said, "Tell Brecker we already moved the accounts. His signature's worthless now. We just need him to think it isn't." Petra's hand tightened on the mop handle. The man at the head of the table, Brecker apparently, looked up at the translator seated to his left. The translator was a slight man in his 40s who had the nervous energy of someone who had not slept in 2 days. He said, "Mr. Phenom, Chen says the account transfers are proceeding on schedule and he looks forward to your continued partnership." Brecker nodded slowly. "Good. Tell him I appreciate his confidence." Petra did not move. She did not move because she was doing a very fast calculation. The kind she had been doing since she was 9 years old and her mother would bring home contracts from the factory where she worked. And Petra would sit at the kitchen table and read through them. Not because anyone asked her to, but because the language of documents was the first language she had ever truly loved. She had added 7 others since. She was also doing a different kind of calculation, the kind that involved the gun on the table, the 6 men who were not Brecker, and the very specific meaning of the phrase "his signature is worthless now." Edward Brecker was being robbed in real time, in a language he didn't speak, in his own building, by men he had invited here as partners. And the only person in the room who knew it was the woman holding the mop. She should have left. She knew she should have left. She had a bus to catch in a studio apartment in Sunnyside and a cat named Horatio who would be waiting by the door, and none of what was happening in this room was her problem. She stood there for 4 more seconds. Then she walked toward the table. The man near the door stood up so fast his chair scraped. "I said get." "Mr. Brecker." Her voice was steady. She was surprised by that. She had not known it would be steady. "Your translator just told you the account transfers are proceeding on schedule. That is not what Mr. Chen said." The room went very quiet. Brecker looked at her, not through her, the way most men in this building looked at her, actually at her. The way you look at something that has just made an unexpected sound. "Excuse me," he said. "Mr. Chen told the man beside him, in Mandarin, that your signature is already worthless, that the accounts have been moved, that you're being kept cooperative until they don't need you anymore." She held his gaze. She did not look at Chen. She did not look at the gun. "I'm the cleaning staff. I'm also fluent in Mandarin. And I'm telling you that you have approximately 3 minutes before whatever they're waiting for is complete." The translator was on his feet. "She doesn't know what she's." Brecker raised one hand. The translator stopped. There was a quality to the silence that followed that Petra recognized from the contracts her mother used to bring home, from the moment just before the clause that changed everything. A held breath. A pivot point. Brecker looked at her for a long time. His eyes were gray and colder than she expected, and she could see him running his own calculations. "What's your name?" he said. "Petra Voss. I clean floors 40 through 45. Chen said something sharp in Mandarin to the man beside him. Petra caught it without blinking. "Contain her." "Mr. Chen would like to know if you speak any other languages," she said conversationally, "because he's concerned about what you're going to do with what I've told you, and he just asked his associate to make sure I don't leave the room." The associate had already taken a step toward her. Brecker said, "Don't." One word, but the associate stopped. Brecker stood up slowly. He was taller than she'd realized. He buttoned his jacket with the unhurried precision of a man who had spent 30 years making rooms wait for him. He looked at Chen across the table. Then he said in flawless Mandarin, "I think we're finished here." Chen's face did something complicated. Brecker switched to French. For the benefit of the man on Chen's left, Petra realized, the one who had been the quietest, which meant he was likely the most dangerous. He said in French, "Your wire authorization expires in 11 minutes. I've already sent instructions to my bank in Geneva. Whatever you moved, they'll freeze it before it clears." The Frenchman's stillness fractured by exactly 1 millimeter. Then Brecker said in German, to the man near the door, "You can see yourself out, all of you." Petra stood with her mop and watched Edward Brecker dismantle a room in 4 languages. She had not known he spoke 4 languages. She suspected from the look on Chen's face that Chen had not known either. That, she realized, was the point. The men left in the way that powerful men leave when they have lost. Not quickly, not with noise, but with a terrible compressed dignity. Jackets straightened, phones already out, the whole retreating machinery of damage control already clicking into motion. The translator scurried after them without looking at Petra. The associate near the door was the last to go. He paused beside her. He was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and slightly wrong, like a word mispronounced in an otherwise perfect sentence. He looked down at her. She was used to being looked down at, and his expression said everything his mouth did not. Then he left. The door closed. Petra and Brecker were alone in conference suite A with the water pitcher and the gun and the remains of whatever this evening had been supposed to be. Brecker exhaled. He sat down on the edge of the table. For the first time, he looked like a man who had been through something rather than a man who controlled things. "How long were you standing there?" he said. "Long enough." "How much did you hear?" "Everything from when Mr. Chen arrived." She paused. The translator was mistranslating from the beginning. Not everything, just the parts that mattered. It was actually quite skillfully done. Brecker looked at her. "You've been cleaning this building for how long?" 3 years. "And you speak?" "Mandarin, French, German, Portuguese, Arabic, Russian, Japanese, and English." She said it the way she said most things about herself. Flatly, without preface, because she had learned early that preface invited commentary she didn't want. "I grew up moving. My father was with the Foreign Service, not in any important capacity. We just moved a lot." Brecker was quiet for a moment. "Why are you cleaning floors?" She met his eyes. "Because it pays on time and doesn't require references from people who'd rather I didn't exist." Something shifted in his expression. She couldn't name it. "The accounts," she said. "Do you actually have a hold on them?" "I will in about 4 minutes." He had his phone in his hand. "I made the call while Chen was watching you. He wasn't watching me. You used me as a distraction." "I used the situation." He looked up. "You were the one who created it." She supposed that was true. She picked up her mop. The bucket had rolled slightly toward the window during the commotion, and she straightened it automatically, and then felt the absurdity of the action so acutely that she almost laughed. "You should call building security," she said, "and probably your lawyers, and someone should take that gun." "Petra." She turned. Brecker was watching her with that same quality of attention, the kind she associated with contracts and documents and things that meant more than they appeared to mean on the surface. "I'd like to talk to you," he said. "Not tonight. Tonight I have several fires to put out, and you have." He glanced at the cart. "A bus to catch." She stared at him. "How did you know that?" "You checked your watch twice while you were talking to me. Same gesture both times. And you didn't touch your phone, which means you're not waiting for a car." He set his own phone down. "Tomorrow morning. Breakfast. There's a place on 53rd that opens at 7. I work mornings. I own the company that manages this building. I'll arrange the morning off." He said it without arrogance, simply the way someone states a fact about the weather. "Please." She looked at him for a long time. "I want to hear about the Foreign Service postings," he said, "and the languages, and why someone with your particular set of skills is doing what you're doing." He paused. "And I want to say thank you in a setting where I'm not having a myocardial event." Despite everything, she almost smiled. 7:15, she said. "I don't like to wait." She pushed the cart out of Conference Suite A, down the hallway, and into the service elevator. The doors closed. She looked at her reflection in the brushed steel, navy uniform, rubber band, mop bucket, the whole unprepossessing sum of her, and she thought about the look on Chen's face when Brecker had switched to French. The elevator descended. She had a bus to catch. Breakfast became lunch, became a phone call at 6 in the evening that lasted 2 hours and covered the secondary debt structure of 3 separate holding companies, the specific failures of machine translation in legal contexts, and, somewhere in the middle, her father's posting in Beirut in 2003, which was where she had learned Arabic from the woman who ran the bakery near their apartment, who had also taught her to play backgammon and had opinions about imported flour that Petra still thought about. Brecker listened the way very few people listened. He asked questions that built on the previous answers. He did not interrupt. By the end of the week, she had a consultant contract on Hargrove's legal translation desk, working alongside the firm's existing team. The team was polite and bewildered and somewhat territorial. Petra had been the subject of other people's bewilderment before. She kept her head down and did the work, which was the only response she had ever found that actually mattered. By the end of the month, 3 contracts that had been stalled for weeks were moving again. One of them had been stalled because a subordinate clause in the Portuguese version meant something categorically different from the English version, and nobody on the existing team read Portuguese, and nobody had thought to check. Petra had thought to check. Brecker called her into his office on a Friday afternoon. His office was on the 47th floor and had the kind of view that people in New York pay entire incomes to approximate. He was standing at the window when she came in. "The Chen situation," he said without turning. "The investigation is moving forward. His associate, the one who stood by the door, has already made a deal with the DA." "I know," she said. "I read the filing." He turned. "How did you get access to that filing?" "It's public record. I read faster than most people." He looked at her for a moment. Then he smiled. Not the managed, considered expression she had seen him use in meetings, but something quicker and less controlled, there and gone. "There are 3 more contracts on your desk," he said. "French, German, and one that's apparently in a dialect of Arabic that our existing translator described as challenging." "Gulf Arabic," she said. "I can have them done by Tuesday." "I was going to say end of next week." "Tuesday," she said, "if you want them done right. Thursday, if you want them done fast and right." "Tuesday," he said. "Please." She turned to leave. Petra. She had been hearing her name in his voice for a month now. She had not gotten used to it. She was not sure she wanted to get used to it. "The associate," he said, "by the door. He knows your face." She had been aware of this. She had not mentioned it because she did not want to be the kind of person who traded on inconvenience. "I've arranged for your address to be kept off the building directory," he said, "and I'd like to move your office to 46, better door security." She considered this. "My office is a desk in the corner of the translation room." That's what I'm changing." He said it simply. The corner desk on 46 was just vacated. It has a door. She looked at him. "I'm not doing this to manage you," he said. "I'm doing it because Chen's people are expensive and patient, and the woman who cost them $23 million in frozen assets deserves a door with a lock on it." 23 million. She hadn't known the number. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. She left. She rode the elevator down to her floor. She sat at her corner desk in the translation room and opened the first of the 3 contracts. French. A real estate acquisition in Lyon, and she thought about $23 million, and a man who listened without interrupting, and a lock on a door. She opened the contract. She began to read. The second time Chen's people came for her, it was a Tuesday. It was always a Tuesday, she thought afterward. Something about Tuesdays. She was in the parking structure on 46's attached garage, which she used because it connected to a side entrance, and the side entrance meant she didn't have to stand on the street waiting for the light. She had learned this about herself in Beirut and confirmed it in 7 cities since. She preferred not to be stationary on sidewalks. A door or a car or a wall at her back. Some habits were structural. The car came from the wrong direction. She noticed that first. The garage was one way. The car was going the wrong way. She noticed second that it was moving slowly, which was not what lost or confused drivers did. She was already moving when the door opened. She was not, by any measure that the world would recognize, a physically formidable person. She was 5'4" and wore sensible shoes and had never taken a self-defense class. What she had done, in Beirut at age 13, was watch the man her father's department used as a security consultant walk through every building they entered and explain, not to her, to the other adults. But she listened. The 2 exits. The 1, structural weakness. The sideline problems. She had been listening ever since. She went left, toward the stairwell. The stairwell door was propped. She had propped it herself an hour ago, coming in with her hands full of coffee and files. The prop was still there. She went through and let the door close behind her and went up, not down, because down was where they would expect. She called Brecker. He picked up on the first ring. It was 9:45 at night. She had not considered until this moment that he might not pick up. "There are 2 of them," she said, already moving up the stairs. "The parking garage. I'm in the stairwell going to 43. There was a half-second of silence. "Are you hurt?" "No. They didn't get close." "Stay on the line." She heard him say something to someone else, sharp, efficient, a name she didn't catch. Then, "Building security is on the way. Don't stop moving." "I'm not stopping." "I know you're not." A pause. 43 has a security station near the elevator bank. There will be someone there. There was someone there. He was already on his feet when she came to the door, and she stopped in the hallway of 43 and breathed for a moment and thought, "Tuesday." Brecker arrived 12 minutes later. She knew it was 12 minutes because she was counting, not from anxiety but from habit, the same habit that had her reading lease agreements for pleasure and checking the accuracy of restaurant bills even when she was the one paying. He came through the elevator bank looking like a man who had left in the middle of something and didn't care. His jacket was gone. He'd apparently been working late. He walked toward her with the particular speed of someone who is not running but is covering ground very fast, and he stopped in front of her and looked at her face. "I'm fine," she said. "I know," he said. But he was still looking. "The propped door," she said. "I did that myself. An hour ago. It's bad practice and I won't." "Petra." His voice had something in it she hadn't heard before. "Stop explaining." She stopped. He was close. The hallway was quiet. Down the elevator bank, the security guard was on his radio with his back turned, and the fluorescent lights were the kind that buzzed just below the threshold of hearing. And she was suddenly aware that she had been running on adrenaline for 12 minutes and was now, abruptly, not. "They're not going to stop," she said. "Not a question." "No," he said. "Not until the trial." He said it without flinching. "Which is why." He stopped. He seemed For the first time since she had met him, to be choosing his words rather than simply producing them. "There's a building I own in Midtown. Fully secured. I want you to stay there until this is over." She looked at him. "That's not." "It's not charity," he said, "and it's not management. It's—" He exhaled. "You cost them $23 million, and your testimony could cost them 30 years. They are not going to forget that, and neither am I. And I am not going to let something happen to you because I was careful about appearances." She stood there in the fluorescent hallway of the 43rd floor with her sensible shoes and her files that she'd somehow managed to keep hold of through the whole thing, and she looked at Edward Brecker, and she thought about what it meant to be seen by someone as clearly as she could see most things. Documents, contracts, the subordinate clauses where the real meaning lived. "One condition," she said. "Name it." "I keep the job. My desk, the contracts on Tuesdays and the French acquisition and all of it. I'm not staying anywhere as a protected liability. I'm staying as—" She searched for the word. "A colleague." Something moved through his expression. That same thing she couldn't name. "That was never in question," he said. "You're not a liability. You're the sharpest mind in this building." He said it the way he'd said everything else, simply as fact, not decoration. "The rest is just logistics." She looked at him for a long time. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. The trial lasted 11 days. Petra sat in a wood-paneled room and translated documents that Chen's legal team had structured to be specifically, intentionally opaque. The kind of opacity that required not just fluency but encyclopedic knowledge of how financial language differed from legal language differed from colloquial usage across 3 dialects. She was not the kind of witness who needed coaching. The assistant DA had tried, the first morning, and she had listened politely and then said, "I understand what you're trying to do, and I'll be more useful to you if you let me answer the questions as they come. I don't embellish, and I don't simplify, and I don't lose the thread." The assistant DA had looked at her for a moment and then said, "Okay," in the voice of someone who was going to write about this later. Chen's defense attorney tried 4 times to rattle her. On the second try, he suggested, not quite directly, that her presence in Suite A had been something other than coincidental. Petra looked at him. She said, "I was cleaning the floor. The schedule is in evidence as Exhibit 7. Would you like me to walk you through the timestamps?" The courtroom had a quality of attention she recognized. The same held breath as Suite A. The same pivot point. The defense attorney moved on. Brecker was in the gallery every day. She was not supposed to notice this. She noticed it. On the last day, walking out of the courthouse into the kind of New York afternoon that looked like it had been designed by someone who wanted you to feel that things could be okay, he fell into step beside her. 11 days, he said. 11 days, she agreed. "You never missed a translation." "I don't miss things." He smiled. "The real one, the quick one." "No," he said, "you don't." They walked half a block. It was the kind of walking that was also standing still, in the way that some silences were also conversation. "There's a contract on your desk," he said. "When you're ready. Arabic, Gulf dialect. The Leon acquisition went through, by the way. The buyer signed this morning." "I know," she said. "I read the filing." He laughed. She had heard him laugh before, but not like that. Not the caught-off-guard, genuine kind. "Petra," he said. She looked at him. "I'd like to have dinner," he said. "Not to discuss a contract. Not logistics." He said it the way he'd once said please in a conference room full of wreckage, carefully because it mattered to get it right. "I'd like to have dinner with someone I find—" He paused. "Extraordinary." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the mop handle and the gun on the table and the bus she'd almost caught and the 12 minutes in a fluorescent hallway and 11 days in a wood-paneled room and the way he had said her name. For the first time, in a room where no one else thought she deserved to have one. "Thursday," she said. "I don't like Tuesdays." He smiled. Thursday, he said. The city went on around them, indifferent and enormous the way cities were. Petra Voss, who cleaned floors 40 through 45 and read lease agreements for pleasure and spoke 8 languages and had spent most of her adult life learning to be invisible, walked out into the afternoon light. She had no intention of being invisible anymore. I keep thinking about the mop handle. Not the courtroom, not the 11 days of testimony, or the $23 million, or the moment Edward switched to French and watched Chen's face fall apart. I keep thinking about Petra standing in that doorway with a mop handle in her hand, doing the math, knowing she should leave and choosing not to. That's the part nobody talks about when they tell stories like this. They talk about the talent. 8 languages, what a gift, what a mind. And yes, but talent doesn't walk into a room full of dangerous men and open its mouth. Something else does that, something quieter and harder and a lot less glamorous than genius. I think about what it costs to be invisible for years and still show up, still do the work, still read contracts for pleasure on your lunch break in a building where nobody learned your name. Petra didn't become sharp in that boardroom. She was already sharp. She had been sharp through every posting in every city, through the rubber band and the too large uniform and a supervisor who told her to act like she wasn't there. She kept learning anyway. She kept paying attention anyway. That kind of persistence. The kind with no audience, no reward, no guarantee that it ever amounts to anything. That's not ambition. That's something more like integrity. You do it because it's who you are, not because someone is watching. And then there's what she actually did in that room. Not just the translation. Anyone with the languages could have translated. What she did was make a choice about what kind of person she was going to be when it was inconvenient and frightening, and nobody would have blamed her for walking out. She saw something wrong. She had the means to address it. She spoke. That's a moral act, not a clever one. It came before the cleverness. The intelligence was only useful because the integrity was already there underneath it. What gets me is Chen. He had resources, connections, a plan that had been in motion for months. He had every structural advantage, and he lost ultimately because he looked at Petra and saw a cleaning woman. He made the oldest mistake there is. He decided that what a person appeared to be was what they were. He stopped paying attention. His certainty about her invisibility is what made him visible. The world is full of people who will look at you and decide in about 4 seconds what you're worth. Some of them will be in positions of power over you. Some of them will be right in front of you at a conference table with a gun nearby and a plan already in motion, and you will have a choice in that moment about whether their assessment of you is the one that matters. Petra had been making that choice for years before anyone was watching. That's why she was ready when it counted. You don't become who you are in the big moments. You just find out.